Watching horror movies might not be everyone's cup of tea, especially for kids. But Norman stands apart from the crowd. He's captivated by ghosts. This fascination is rooted in his unique ability to communicate with the deceased. Norman resides in a cozy home with his parents and older sister, Courtney. One evening, Norman makes a simple request to his father, Perry, asking him to adjust the heating system as Grandma seems to be feeling the chill. Perry's patience wears thin, reminding Norman of the countless times he's explained that Grandma has passed away. Undeterred, Norman persists in sharing about his daily conversations with his grandmother's ghost, often found in the living room. Regrettably, his family remains unconvinced, leaving Norman in isolation. Perry's frustration escalates into an argument with his wife, Sandra, blaming her for Norman's perceived eccentricities. He pins this on their odd uncle Prendergast, who apparently exhibited similar behaviors as a child. Curiously, Norman has never crossed paths with this uncle, prompting him to wonder if there are others like him in the world. The next day, Norman readies himself for school, venturing out into the streets where he cheerfully greets the passing ghosts. Although these spirits are quite fond of Norman, his uniqueness is lost on the people around him. Even at school, he's branded a misfit and becomes the target of bullies. Norman's resilience shines through as he tries to fit in, even participating in the school play. Unfortunately, the bullies continue to make his life difficult, ensuring he remains an outcast. In the midst of this, Norman encounters another student named Neil, who's also grappling with bullying due to his weight. Unlike most, Neil maintains an upbeat outlook. He befriends Norman after school, drawn to Norman's uncommon talent. Neil is intrigued, hoping Norman can communicate with his deceased pet dog. Norman is cautious, having been advised by his parents to steer clear of his uncle's oddities. Suddenly, a man's voice pierces the air. It's Prendergast. He emerges from the shadows, keen to converse with Norman. Despite Norman's attempts to evade the unsettling figure, Prendergast insists on imparting crucial information about an impending calamity. The witch's curse is real and closing in. Prendergast acknowledges that he can no longer shoulder the town's protection, and he sees in Norman the potential to take over this responsibility. Given Norman's unique ability to communicate with spirits, Prendergast shares his warning before departing, cautioning Norman to remain vigilant for the signs he may encounter. Norman, wary of his uncle's eerie reputation, dismisses the unsettling exchange. Neil remains fascinated by the power Norman shares with his uncle. This curiosity leads Neil to coax Norman to his house, where Neil is eager to ascertain whether Norman can perceive the spirit of his departed puppy. Despite Neil's older brother Mitch's caution against associating with unusual individuals, Neil disregards the warning. He ushers Norman to the backyard, where they engage in joyful play with the ethereal presence of Neil's canine companion. As time swiftly elapses, the school play draws near. The students' performances are outstanding, collectively honoring the Witch Festival. The festivities commemorate the villagers' past actions, the execution of the nefarious witch, and the significance of that event. Amid the revelry, Norman stands apart, his attention caught by an unusual owl in flight. Suddenly, his surroundings morph, enveloping him in a dark forest teeming with figures intent on harm. His escape from this nightmarish scenario is accompanied by a declaration that the dead are imminent. The impact is profound. The audience is taken aback, their assumption that Norman is afflicted by a mental disorder evident in their shocked expressions. Even his parents are not happy. Perry scolds Norman for not conforming to societal norms, even stating that he never wished for a son like him. These cruel words shatter Norman's heart, deepening his isolation. Left misunderstood and despondent, Norman's situation deteriorates further. The subsequent day at school, his peers ridicule him mercilessly. Overwhelmed by the relentless taunting, Norman seeks refuge in the restroom, locking himself inside. A sudden gust of wind rattles the walls, causing tremors. The toilet overflows, and in the midst of his fear, Norman witnesses a ghost emerge from the toilet seat. It's Prendergast, now deceased due to a heart attack. He bears the solemn duty of transferring his responsibilities to another, Norman himself. The ghostly tale unfolds. A witch, executed in the town's history, left behind a sinister curse. For years, Prendergast had been thwarting her spirit's return. However, if she were to succeed, the deceased would rise from their graves. Norman is the chosen successor to prevent this catastrophe. Guided by a special book in Prendergast's possession, Norman must read it at the witch's grave before sunset. Following the completion of this final task, Prendergast's soul finds tranquility, and Norman is left with the monumental task ahead. While grounded by his father, Norman grapples with the decision to heed Prendergast's guidance. Neil visits, but is hesitant about joining Norman on these eerie missions. Alone again, Norman faces reminders of his pact with Prendergast through unsettling toys strewn around. Unexpectedly, his grandmother's spirit appears. Having remained in the mortal realm to watch over him, she imparts wisdom, urging Norman not to fear unless change is imminent. Her encouragement emboldens Norman. He defies his father's grounding, pedaling his bicycle toward his mission. Time dwindles, less than an hour remaining. Rushing past Alvin, a school bully, Norman provokes him unintentionally. Guided by Alvin's pursuit, Norman reaches a sinister cottage, Prendergast's abode. The house teems with peculiarities, and a swarm of insects impedes Norman's progress. In the study, Prendergast's lifeless body clutches the book tightly. Despite the odds, Norman eventually claims the book, setting his sights on the graveyard. Within the graveyard's depths, he locates the burial site of the witch and her victims. Commencing the incantations, Norman's voice carries through the air, unexpectedly sounding like a fairy tale rather than a spell. In a twist of fate, Alvin emerges, snatching the book just as the sun sinks, unleashing a gusty wind. The witch's resurrection triggers earth tremors, and the undead emerge from their graves, encircling the youngsters. Norman's attempts to thwart them with the book prove futile, forcing them to flee. Meanwhile, Courtney, Norman's elder sister, searches for her brother, eventually finding Neil. Unable to locate Norman, Neil speculates he might be at the graveyard. Courtney asks Mitch to accompany her in the search for Norman, and together they embark on the journey toward the graveyard. Simultaneously, Norman and Alvin take refuge within Prendergast's cottage, their hideout of choice. A thorough examination of the study reveals a photograph depicting the 7 victims of the witch's curse. This triggers a realization in Norman. The ritual failed because there were only 7 graves corresponding to the victims. The witch's grave, vital for the incantation, was missing. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps reaches their ears. Zombies have arrived. Though they manage to conceal themselves initially, Alvin's fear gets the best of him. He screams, attracting the attention of a zombie by the door. Norman reacts swiftly, slamming the door shut on the approaching undead, and both he and Alvin escape. Outside, Mitch's car proves effective in mowing down a zombie, but the situation quickly escalates as more zombies close in. Amidst the chaos, Courtney blames Norman for the predicament. Oblivious to Norman's unique abilities, she remains unaware that he holds the key to their survival, and a zombie breaches the vehicle. The group's only hope lies in locating the actual resting place of the witch. In a moment of insight, Alvin suggests seeking the help of their classmate Salma, a history prodigy. Salma employs her research skills and pinpoints the town hall as a potential source of valuable information. Despite their setbacks, they forge ahead towards the town hall on foot. The group's presence draws the attention of the zombie-infested town, leading to a confrontation between the citizens and the undead. The citizens struggle against the relentless zombies, their attempts to eradicate the undead proving insufficient. Meanwhile, the group's progress within the town hall is hindered by the vast number of records. Frustration mounts as they realize the enormity of their task. As tension escalates, the zombies break free from their confinement and infiltrate the town, intensifying the urgency. Having entered the town hall through a back entrance, the group's actions are observed by a vigilant woman who quickly alerts the town, prompting an enraged mob to converge on the town hall, armed and ready for confrontation. Inside the town hall, Courtney and the others attempt to manage the situation outside, aiming to prevent the citizens from setting the building ablaze. In the midst of the chaos, Norman's frustration reaches a breaking point. He insists that everyone leave, determined to resolve the crisis independently. He rejects any assistance, believing that nobody comprehends him or his predicament. Courtney and the others depart the records room, focusing on calming the irate citizens outside. Their efforts center on defusing the situation and halting the plan to set the town hall on fire. Meanwhile, Norman remains focused on his mission. As the zombies close in on him, he flees, eventually climbing onto the roof of the town hall. From this vantage point, he gazes up at the sky, where the image of the witch appears against a blood-red backdrop. His voice carries across the airwaves as he recites the incantations from the book. Despite his efforts, the incantations yield no results, and the witch's laughter resonates in response. In an abrupt turn of events, the witch hurls Norman from the rooftop. As Norman plummets, he experiences a surreal vision, a glimpse into the past. He witnesses the time when the zombies were living humans, serving as court jurors. This revelation discloses that they had unjustly convicted a young girl named Aggie, who, akin to Norman, possessed the ability to communicate with the deceased. wrongly accused of witchcraft, Aggie met a tragic fate at the hands of the very jurors who were now the zombies pursuing Norman. After regaining his composure, Norman finds himself surrounded by the zombies. These undead beings implore him to read the fairy tale to the witch, hoping it will send her back to her slumber. Fueled by a deep sense of injustice, Norman rejects the book, a symbol of the unfair decision made by the zombies in the past. He feels a strong repulsion towards the fact that they condemned Aggie, an innocent little girl, simply because she was different. In Norman's eyes, putting the witch to sleep is not a solution. Communication and forgiveness are the keys to healing. Norman steps out of the town hall and appeals to the citizens to stop the violence. Unfortunately, he is met with suspicion and accusations, as they believe he is aligning himself with evil. In a pivotal moment, Courtney cannot stand by any longer. She confronts the crowd, standing alongside her brother, even though she doesn't fully grasp his plan. Despite her uncertainty, she believes in Norman's intentions to save the town. With the support of Courtney and a growing realization among the citizens, Norman addresses the gathered crowd. He explains that the zombies harbor no ill will towards them. They are victims of a past mistake that cursed them. Norman pleads with the crowd to think carefully, lest they repeat history and perpetuate the curse. His impassioned words resonate, prompting the people to lay down their weapons and rally behind Norman's cause. Meanwhile, the witch's fury escalates, intensifying the urgency of stopping her. Norman asks his father to drive them to the witch's grave. As they approach, a zombie acts as their guide into the forest. However, as they exit the car, the trees come alive, ensnaring the group. Only Norman manages to break free and proceed onward. He arrives at the place where Aggie was buried. The encounter with the witch becomes a fierce battle. She attacks Norman with wooden spikes, determined to ward him off. Yet, Norman remains resolute, narrating a story of a gifted girl who was misunderstood by society, much like Aggie. Despite her attacks, Norman persists in conveying Aggie's life story, highlighting her innate goodness. He reveals how she was a victim of fear and hatred, culminating in her unjust execution as a supposed witch. Through his words, Norman hopes to penetrate the witch's anger and resentment. Eventually, Norman's words begin to penetrate Aggie's defenses. He describes her fear of being misunderstood, her isolation, and the tragedy of her unjust demise. Aggie's anger and pain start to wane as she listens to Norman's tale. In a pivotal moment, Norman holds out his hand to her. The gesture of understanding breaks down the barriers between them. Aggie's soul begins to shift, and they journey together through her past. They witness her as a young girl visiting the forest to commune with her deceased mother. The turning point comes when those who feared her labeled her as a witch and sentenced her to death. This traumatic event, witnessed by both Norman and Aggie, forces her to confront her own hatred and desire for revenge. As the truth unfolds, Aggie's soul is released from its torment. She comprehends the cycle of vengeance that had consumed her and finally finds peace. Norman's compassion and persistence lead her to release her anger, and as she leans on Norman, her soul departs the world. The curse that bound both the witch and the zombies is lifted, and they are freed from their torment. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more interesting movies.